Hi, how are you? It's not, nobody's coming on yet, and it's, oh, wait a minute.
12:26.
Here we go. Steve Bass connecting. Can't hear you. Hello? It's the second time that somebody's said that they can't hear me. Stop video. Chat. Hi, Rabbi.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfect. How are you?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to wait a minute for people to, we got a few minutes for everybody to log on and see who's here. Steve, welcome. Hey, Betsy.
Hey, baby.
Let's see what controls I have. You can feel free to unmute yourself.
This is one of your new students. Her name is Bella.
Very nice. I'm on my iPad, not on my computer, so my control options are limited. Somehow I can't get to all of the controls that I usually have, so I'm gonna, you can mute and unmute yourself as necessary.
Okay. Here.
Take her. So when Rabbi Newman and I were discussing doing kind of a daily midweek, what we decided to call a dose of Torah, because we all need a dose of something these days, was partly because learning together in some small bites at least is good and healthy for all of our souls and our physical well-being, but also we want to try to create as much community and maintain synagogue community as possible. So part of the time is going to be checking in and giving each of you a chance to share a thought or anything that you might want to ask me, or just with each other. So after we do a little bit of learning, perhaps we'll just check in and see how everybody is doing. So I'm going to wait another minute until a few people more log on if they want before we start. Anybody want to offer any comments or thoughts, how they're doing, anything exciting, different they want to share?
Yeah, Susie's putting me to work outside.
Yeah, doing what?
What do I do? How do I say no?
You don't, but what are you doing?
Just making the backyard pretty. We're going to put a patio on top of this one little area. She's working on the grass and putting in sunflowers and.
Well, as soon as you start,
Yeah.
pull your back out, quote unquote, pull your back out.
Oh, but that would kind of be not the truth, though.
Yeah, well.
And we're in a Torah class, so I don't think I can't take that advice.
Yeah.
Okay, call your kids.
Okay.
Stuart, did my parents reach out to you? They said they called you the other day.
I just tried to call him. I kidded him. Yeah, they called me. They called on Shabbos. So we just called because we want to go by and, sit outside or something. But anyway, I told them, I said, they didn't answer. So I said, there's a curfew here. Are you guys still out from dancing from last night? They haven't answered me yet, though.
David, do you see him around?
Hi, David.
I see, yes. Well, your dad walking the dog a lot.
Nice. Those two are in love, man. I never saw anything like that. When I brought the dog over there, those two, they were separated for what, 1 day or two, whatever it was. And I brought the dog over it was like they hadn't seen each other for years. They were so excited. Hey, Alan.
All right.
Hi, Steve.
Steve, I like that picture.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's a nice picture.
Yeah, I'm having, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Rabbi, are we supposed to be reading the Parsha Hashavua for the class? Because I did this past week and I did this coming week.
You don't have to.
I did.
It's a big double parsha. It's a lot of it is esoteric, so I'm going to try to just teach some things from it. I also sent a source sheet that if you print it out or have online is helpful but not necessary. So,
I did not get that. Let me see.
It was with the email that went out this morning. So always take a look before the class, the morning before, the day before, to see if I sent out a source sheet. But it's not essential, but helpful. So I'm going to begin. If you have questions. I can't see everybody on one screens, but you can shout out and stop me if you need to ask a question. But so this week's parsha is a double parsha of Tazria and Mitzorah, which after dealing with some issues related to the birth of a child, and it deals a lot with Tara and Tuma issues of ritual, spiritual purity and impurity. We have, as I mentioned this morning after davening, it mentions again the commandment for Brit Milah, for circumcision, in the 8th day. We learn a couple of laws from that. We learn that it has to be Yom HaShmini, on the 8th day. It can't be at night. You can't do a circumcision at night. And also that it supersedes the Shabbat. In other words, if the 8th day falls on Shabbat, then you can do a circumcision on Shabbat.
I'm mixed up because I looked here and I did Shemini and then I did Tazria.
Okay, well, last Shabbos, this past Shabbos was Shemini.
Right.
Shabbos is a double parsha of Tazria and Mitzorah, which are connected.
Do it. Okay,
so that's okay.
I messed that up. Okay.
It's okay. All right, so, and the whole...
Can I stop for a second, Rabbi? Somebody's got noise in the background, so I can't really hear.
Yeah, so if that person can mute themselves, because I don't see the automatic mute button on mine right now.
Okay.
Oh, well, wait a minute.
There, I think it stopped, whatever it was.
Okay. I found it. Okay. All right. So what I wanted to deal with really is the topic of the Metzorah, what is erroneously translated often as leprosy. It may or may not be physical leprosy. We don't really know for sure. But what we do know is that Metzorah is a physical representation of a spiritual malady. And I'll explain. What is considered maybe a plague or a disease may in many ways actually be a bracha, a blessing that God has bestowed upon the children of Israel. In other words, Metzorah represents itself in three ways. It kind of works its way into your dwelling place. You can find Metzorah the Nega Metzorah on your walls of your house, which is discussed, on your clothing, and ultimately on your skin, on your physical body. There's all kinds of midrashim. Today we're not going to go into that. What we do know is that, and part of the proof of it being a spiritual malady is when one has this nega, when one sees this manifestation of tzora'as in any of these ways, they go to the Kohen. If you look at the first source, it says, Negat Sorat Yiteh Ba'adam V'huva El HaKohen. When a person has, here it says scaly affection, I'm going to call it affliction. When one has this affliction, it shall be reported to the priest. The verses go on. V'ra'aha Kohen, the Kohen will see it. V'timaha Kohen, the Kohen will declare it an impurity, a tumah. V'tiharoha Kohen, and the Kohen will declare the person to be tahor. In other words, the process that one goes through of tzora'as, from declaring it to actually be tzora'as, to the point, or when one seeks clarification, to then ultimately finding that it is in fact the affliction of tzora'as, to the point that it's actually cured, it is all done through the Kohen. So why the Kohen? The Kohen, who is the spiritual kind of leader and the spiritual architect, and he also has to know some of the science behind it. It's no different really than when you want to have a question about a lulav or an esrog, or have a question about wine and how to make wine, right? The rabbis had to be experts in those fields as well, or biology if you're dealing with nida, with family purity, right? The rabbis, the Kohanim, had to be educated in botany and biology and many other things. And here's another example. The Kohanim had to be trained into what is the physicality of tzora'at, but also understanding that it is a spiritual malady. So having said that, the Gemara in Erchin, by the way, by a show of hands, how many of you actually have the source sheet or seen the source sheet?
Have it now.
Okay, good. So the source that I want to turn to is a source in the Gemara in Erchin, very famous source, that basically says what are the underlying causes of tzorah? For what sin, so to speak, does one have tzora'as? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Shmuel bar Nachmani said, in the name of Amar Rav Yochanan, Rav Yochanan said, Al Shiva Devarim, for 7 things, Negaim Ba'in, that there are 7 things that cause this affliction of tzora'as. What are they? Lashon hara, right? Evil talk, gossip. Shvichut damim, murder. Now, shvichut damim oftentimes there can be 2 ways of looking at shvichut damim. There's the actual physical taking of a life, but there's also shvichut damim that is character assassination, right? When you what's the word I'm thinking of? The English word?
Embarrass?
No, there's a formal word. Blanking out. When you assail somebody's character. Anyway, so you assassinate. Libel. Thank you. When you libel somebody, Ba'al shvuat shav, if you take a false oath in God's name, Val Gilu Arayot for forbidden sexual activities, Val Gasat Ruach for haughtiness, Val Gezel and for stealing, Val Tzorat Ayin and for being very stingy. So you see that contained here are first and foremost in there are the big three, the three cardinal sins, right? Which Shvuah Shav is part of taking God's name in vain, murder and forbidden sexual relations, as well as several that have to do really with how we talk about others, basically interpersonal relationships. So what I want to discuss is I want to, pardon the pun, I want to take an under the skin subcutaneous dive and look at this idea of tzora'at and what it really means. How should we really be approaching the rectification of tzora'at? On Wednesday, maybe we'll talk a little more about some other aspects of tzora'at if we decide to continue with this topic. But here's where I wanted to begin. So the Torah says, Zotia Torah Mitzora B'yom Tartovu Vel Kohen. This shall be the ritual for a leper, it's here translated leper, for the Tzorah at the time that he is to be cleansed, when it has been reported to the priest. So now one has undergone a process. What's the process of Tzora'at? One has this manifestation of either on one's clothing, on one's skin, on one's home, for whatever reason, and one thinks that it might be tzora'at. They go to the Kohen determines that in fact it is. What happens? So what's the purification process? Anyone know?
You have to, I think you have to clean and then stay out for 7 days.
Right.
So there's a period of ostracization.
He's quarantined for a while.
Person is put into quarantine, exactly.
Right.
And the house could be put into quarantine.
House
and ultimately
too,
the
yeah.
house might have to be torn down.
Because it also talks about like utensils and such.
Right. So things are quarantined for a period of time, just like now, right? If you have an item that you think might have been touched by somebody who had the coronavirus, what do? I know some people that put the groceries aside for 3 days, right? You won't open up the bags and for 3 days. So for what? By quarantining it, the virus will dissipate. So apparently there's some dissipation or quarantine. Sometimes a person has to go in the time of the in the time of the Torah, went michutz lamachaneh. They were sent outside the camp. They were ostracized, they were quarantined. And then there is this process of bringing a korban and going to the mikvah. And then at a certain point, they are declared by the Kohen tahor. So part of this idea of quarantining, the Torah says, is the person who transgressed any of these sins, for the most part, with one exception, have transgressed some kind of interpersonal violation. And because of that, the person has to be separated because they didn't know how to maintain proper conduct within the context of being in a community, so to speak. But I want to move beyond that and get to a whole nother level. And the level is, what's the one component, what component is missing here? Isn't stated in the Torah itself, but surely must be implied in order for a person to begin to become purified of the tzora'at. If in fact the tzora'at, as according to the Chazal, the rabbis, the Gemara, is as the result of a sin. What
Tshuva.
component is necessary?
Tshuva.
Teshuvah. What is the process of teshuvah? What has to happen beyond the kind of physical, spiritual remediation of the Kohen? The Kohen looks at it, the Kohen investigates, the Kohen declares, the Kohen ultimately sets the parameters for what the person has to do, and ultimately the Kohen declares the person tahor. What does the person have to do?
She changes behavior.
Well, so that's what I want to investigate, okay? So that's my starting point.
We're not talking about somebody who just something came along and happened to him. There's something that caught some behavior.
There is something that, correct. That is the rabbinic understanding of tzara'as, is there is an underlying cause. Now, the Gemara says the underlying cause was any one of 7 sins that a person could have committed, might have caused the tzara'as. But in order to be matakin, in order to rectify it, there is a different level of process. There's another process that has to take place. And so if we look at the, if we look in the Midrash Rabbah, if you have the source sheet, source number 4. So it says, I just quoted the verse, Zot Torah HaMitzorah. This is the law, this is the Torah of the Mitzorah. So the Midrash says as follows. This is what it means, the verse in Proverbs that says, 6 things the Lord hates, 7 are an abomination to his soul. And these are them: a haughty bearing, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a mind that hatches evil plots, feet quick to run to evil, a false witness testifying lies, and one who incites brothers to quarrel. So what does that sound a lot like? What do these 7 things sound a lot like? The Gemara in Erechin, the things that cause tzora'at. And Rabbi Yochanan said, all of them are struck with tzora'at. So we have 2 sources, the Midrash and the Gemara, that teach us that these are the things that seem to incite and create tzora'as. So now I want to share with you, and I took the time to translate it this morning and put it in the source sheet so you could follow along, the take of the Rav Chaim of Chernovich, Hasidic master, in his Be'er Mayim Chaim. He writes as follows. Therefore, when one wishes to repent for sins at hand, he must go beyond the sin itself and seek out and repair the root character flaw that allowed him to sin. Okay, what does that mean?
He has to recognize his sin.
No, the sin is easy to recognize. In fact, he says just the opposite. You'll see in a minute. I know the sin. I slandered somebody.
Okay.
I did a heinous crime. Any of these things that are mentioned, these 7 things, I know the sin.
Admit that it's a sin?
That's not going to, but that's not the key to tshuva. And in fact, you hear he's going to say, I regret those things.
Okay.
But what is his base? What is his base problem with him within him? What makes him sin? Not that he is sinning,
Correct.
but what makes it part of his base behavior.
Right. So he says as follows. Again, I'm going to read it. The Hebrew says, "Hinei chutz min teshuva al guf ha'avera." In addition to doing tshuva on the body of the sin, the actual sin they did, tzarich litakein shoresh hamida. He has to fix, repair. What's shoresh? The root cause, the root midah, the root characteristic. In other words, what causes me to be a gossip? What causes me to need to defame another person? What could create the personality that could commit murder or do one of the cardinal sins? He goes on. He says as follows. Behold, our sages interpreted the very word, this is beautiful, mitzorah means motzi ra. Now, other rabbis, other commentaries have translated mitzorah as motzi ra, meaning what? Motzi means, right? Hamotzi, who takes out, right? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, right? Who brings forth, right? Bread from the ground, right? Motzi means, motzi ra, most commentaries say, is the lashon hara aspect, the slander aspect. That ra, evil, bad, comes out of your mouth. Motzi ra. That's how most classic, now listen what the Be'er Mayim Chaim says. He says, Motzi Ra is talking about my responsibility. I have to draw out motzi ra, the ra that is within me, the deep penetrating ra, whatever that midah, that characteristic that's stuck inside of me in my heart, that allows me to be that type of person that does that type of sin. I have to be motzi ra. And if I'm not motzi ra, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He brings it forth. How does he bring it forth? In the nega, in the plague, in the physical plague, in a person's skin, on their clothes, on the walls of their house. If you're not motzi ra, God is going to do it, but not in a positive way. You're going to have to suffer for it. You're going to have to be quarantined. You're going to have to be ostracized. It's a beautiful concept.
Yes.
So listen to what he says. He continues. I also contend that the sin itself is ra, because it is known to be the source of the evil. So in other words, the motzi ra isn't the action that I took. The ra is the embedded character, the midah that causes me to do evil things. That's the ra of motzi ra, of mitzvah. And the negative characteristic embedded in the heart from which the sin springs forth is called motzi ra, for is the characteristic that brings forth evil into the world. In reference to this, the Torah states, what does the Torah say? Therefore it says, what's the verse? This shall be the ritual, zot Torah tamitzorah, b'yom ta'arato, right? At the time that he's to be cleansed. Regarding when a person wished to repent of the evil he has done, there is no question that he regrets the sin that he has affected, but if he does not uproot the underlying cause from his heart and come to despise and be disgusted by it, he will surely return to the sin. So this is the kicker. In other words, what Rav Chaim Chernovich is saying is, obviously we regret, most of us. I mean, a person should come to regret, because there are times that we act impulsively. Most crimes, most sins can be impulsive. The worst sins are generally impulsive. And I regret them. At some point, a person regrets them or wants to do teshuvah. And they can do teshuvah, and God might forgive that sin. But if I'm not motzi ra, if I don't uproot it as it's embedded inside of me, what's going to happen?
It's going to come
Grow
out.
back.
It's going to come back. It's going to happen again. And by the way, what midah? He does actually mention it. It's a long essay. He mentions it early in the essay. What is the primary midah, negative character trait that one has to uproot? Anybody know? The Rambam speaks about it.
Arrogance, gaiva.
Well, we'll get to arrogance. Arrogance is an aspect of it. We'll see that in a minute. But worse, that is anger.
Anger.
Mm-hmm. A person who can become angry, who allows anger to reside within them. Listen, there are moments that we become angry. Anger, when it's a passing thing, we all get angry in moments. Real anger, not such real anger. But those that let anger kind of linger within us as a character trait is the worst character. Rambam says to uproot that is the most important thing. But we'll see that haughtiness is definitely one of the major offenses. So if we go one step further, Rav Baruch Simon, Rosh Yeshiva at YU, had a further insight that I thought was really beautiful. I wanted to share with you. So he says, along the lines of this idea, this concept of the embedded ra, motzi ra, to remove that embedded trait from within us. That's the key. That's the hard part, to get to the root, right? You know, oftentimes you can have a wart or some kind of thing, but if you don't get the root out, it'll grow back. So he says as follows. There's another verse later on in Devarim where the Torah talks about the curses, right? In Parshat Ki Tavo, we have all the curses. And there's a verse there that's very powerful. It says, it's source number 7 on the sheet. Because you would not serve the Lord your God in joy and gladness over the abundance of everything. So on the surface, how would you understand that? In that you did not serve the Lord with joy and gladness over the abundance of everything. Therefore, all these curses come upon you. So in a word, it would say it seems to be a lack of appreciation. We only see the negative. We don't see the positive, right? We don't see the good. We don't we don't appreciate, celebrate what we have. That's the simple meaning of that verse. But if you go a little bit deeper, Simon says as follows. He says, tachat. In other words, below what should be joy and gladness, there is sadness. In other words, there are some people who by natural disposition tend to be sad, right? Glass is always half empty, right? They're not the optimist, they're the opposite of that, they're the pessimist. There is a certain pessimistic attitude, but he takes it a little further. He says, this is similar to what the Be'er Mayim Chaim wants to say about the sin of the Mitzorah. Doing tshuva, right, repenting involves investigating, discovering, amending, and eradicating the underlying causes. According to Rav Baruch Simon, people who lack spiritual self-confidence, there's a certain spiritual self-esteem that is lacking. We find it hard. We believe, we have faith, we have emunah, but it's not strong enough. We're not able to bring it out and share it and see it. And that lack of self-confidence in our own faith brings this kind of existential sadness, a sorrow that doesn't allow us always to appreciate and certainly to show with joy and gladness. Aside from the fact this was an extraordinarily difficult Passover for all of us, but how many of us spend so much time focusing on getting ready for Passover or getting ready for Shabbat or the preparations of doing a mitzvah that we fail to actually take the time to enjoy what we're doing? How many of us don't really take the time to really be reflective about the mitzvot that we're doing, to see with joy and gladness that we're doing something spiritually meaningful and fulfilling? We do the avodah, we're serving God, but we do it in such a negative way or such a lack of showing the appreciation, because embedded in us is this lack of faithful self-confidence to be able to express that, wow, we're doing a mitzvah. We're able to do a mitzvah. God blessed us with the resources and the resolve to do a mitzvah. So he says this is similar to this idea of the mitzorah. And lastly, what I want to do is look at the actual ritual of which one has to go through in order to come out of the status of being a mitzorah, of being in this affliction, whatever the affliction happens to be. So what does the person have to do? So in source number 9, V'tziva kohen v'lakach l'mataher shtei tziporim chaya tohorot ve'etz erez ushani tolat ve'ezo. What does the person have to do? They have to do a ritual. They have to bring two birds, a piece of cedar wood, a hyssop branch, and what do? They slaughter one of the birds, they dip all these things in the blood of the bird, and then they have to sprinkle the blood. What do all these things represent? Because we know in the Torah they all have deep representation. So if you look at the Rashis that I included below, the first Rashi says, why two birds? Because when you have certainly sometimes one bird, we have two birds near each other, what do? What do birds generally do when they're not eating or mating?
Cleaning each other.
Or else they're chirping, right? You get up in the morning, like now, it's springtime, you get up, you hear the birds outside, and you hear them chirp. Sometimes it's even an annoyance when you're trying to sleep late now, when you have to get up so early for davening. And you hear the chirping of the birds, right? That's the chatter that's reminiscent of the gossiper who chirps like birds, right? They just chatter away. That's to remind a person of their being, of their chatter. Now, here's another thing that Rabbi Simon suggests. So why the cedar? Why the cedar? If you think of cedars in the Bible, what cedars do you think of?
Lebanon.
The cedars of Lebanon. from which the boards for the Beit HaMikdash were taken, right? They brought that. What was so special about the cedars of Lebanon?
They bend, but they don't break.
They bend and don't back. They're very, very tall.
Yeah.
And they represent, some mentioned earlier, they represent, cedar in the Torah represents gava, represents haughtiness, or can represent haughtiness. So you bring the birds in the cedar that represent the chattering and the mindless chatter, not thinking about the words that come out of your mouth, and the haughtiness. And what is the problem with haughtiness? A person who is haughty thinks they know it all, or don't necessarily have, so their emunah, their faith in God, is they can't fully activate their faith because they get in the way of it. Because it's all about me, right? It's all about me and mine. And so that leads, that's the opposite side of the person who lacks spiritual self-confidence, is a person who's so self-confident that they don't really need to express their emunah fully, because after all, they're the most important thing in the world. And what do? You take the hyssop. The hyssop is a very low branch, right, which represents humility. Rav Simon flips it, and he says, why do you take the cedar and the hyssop? Because sometimes people are too humble. We talk about haughtiness and gaiva and the people that we know that are in the forefront, that we say, look, that person could do with a little more humility and a little more faith in Hashem. But he says the opposite. The person who is so humble in the sense of self-effacing, that lacks the confidence in themselves, they need that cedar wood to give them literally a little bit of more spiritual backbone, to strengthen them, right? And they need to be able to sing like the birds, so to speak, to reflect that joy and happiness of being able to do the mitzvot. So we can see that there's two sides to look at it, and both are very important. We have to be able to know the balance. We have to be able to find the balance. And to do that, we have to be motzi ra. We have to dig down and change those characters, destroy those characteristics that prevent us and hinder us from being able to express our faith, our emunah, our full spiritual self-confidence. Because if we don't, God, in a way, as a blessing, will embed it on the surface. We keep it buried inside ourselves. We don't let it out. God will let it out. God will put it on your homes if your homes aren't the right type of a home. He'll put it on your clothes if you only see the physical and material sides of things that God has given us and blessed us with, and not see the spiritual good and the power of what we can do with what we have, and even in our own bodies if we fail to get the message. And that is the deeper message of the Mitzorah, to be motzi ra, to bring forth those characteristics that create ra, evil, and sin in this world, and to be able to remove them from within. That's my thought for today. So we have a few minutes, just wanted to again check in with everybody. If anybody has a thought or a story that they want to share.
Rabbi, what's the word in that you're referring to here that says haughty or arrogant? What's the word?
Ga'ava.
Huh?
Ga'ava. Gimel Aleph Vav Hey. And in yeshiva it's called gaiva.
He's Gaivadik, yeah.
Yeah.
There are 2 points that occurred to me, connections back in source 6, and talking about that if you do not uproot the underlying cause from the heart, then you will return to it, which goes back to the talking about what complete teshuva is, that the final test is whether, if you're in the same circumstances, whether you would repeat that or not.
Correct. The Rambam, I didn't put that in the source, but I was going to, is that's the proof that you've actually changed. That you're in the exact same situation with the exact same opportunity, and maybe even desire to do the sin, and you refrain from doing it. You have in fact removed that embedded source.
And then in looking back to source 7, talking about that you would not, because you would not serve the Lord your God in joy and gladness over the abundance of everything, sounds like the same reason that's given for expulsion from the land, and which goes back to celebrating the Tov and Simcha. that that if we're not enjoying and really doing the Simcha for the Yom Tovim, then we lose the land.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Rabbi, reading every time it said the word quarantine, it just really seemed to hurt my heart that we're talking about a quarantine with what's going on now, and I don't know if I should have put any connection to it at all.
So, it's hard on the one hand. You can't say this all has happened because of X or Y. We don't know the X or Y, but at the same time, to completely remove ourselves and say, we have no role in this, or we have no role in how to deal with this or how to change this, also is a little bit of a lack of faith. Sometimes saying, I don't know and I don't understand, but I know what I can do that might help improve on some physical or metaphysical level the situation. So quarantining ourselves is helping on the physical level. We're flattening the curve. We're being responsible citizens right now, both thinking of our own health and the health of others. But sitting here together, gathering together, like we're doing right now, and learning a little bit of Torah and sharing thoughts and insights and the introspection that comes from that also helps on a metaphysical level, I believe fully. Hey, Lindsay.
Rabbi, I'm thinking that you could really tie this whole thing to last week's Haftorah, because we always say that the red heifer is a mitzvah we can't understand. And we have King David who can't understand why the person was killed trying to save the ark. And he was really happy. He's trying to serve Hashem with gladness, but then wasn't really gladness. But then he came and said, okay, I'm going to restart this. And then his wife comes out.
She breached.
She's haughty. And she says, you're embarrassing everybody. And then she can't have children, which really kills off what's left of King Shaul, because King Shaul's kingdom could have kept going if she would have been able to have children.
Yeah.
So it kind of fits into the whole of last week's Haftorah.
Yes, and even more amazing about that is just in that one Haftorah, in that section of Tanakh that you just mentioned, think about all of the human frailties and all of the big questions, universal religious questions that are all embedded in that one chapter or two. And so the answer is, I don't have an answer for all of them, but there are answers, and we look at it, we learn from it, we learn from these characters of the Tanakh, we learn that they were as human as the rest of us. And so we have to strive to try to figure out, again, what is the course of action for us to take each and every day?
The Meforshim say about the beginning of the whole problem was that the Aaron should have been carried by the Kohanim and not put on a wagon in the first place. So there's a slippery slope when you start off wrong, and it leads to other things.
Right. So sometimes the answer is cause and effect, and sometimes we can see the cause and effect. We know I did this, and something bad happened because I did it. That could be the cause and effect. But sometimes we don't know the cause and effect. Is the cause that I didn't daven enough this morning? Is the cause that I didn't put my tefillin on correctly this morning? That I have a harder time with. But I don't know. But maybe if I was a little more diligent, maybe it might have made a small difference. I don't know. So that's what we have to struggle with. But the key is not so much worrying about the question as how do we conduct ourselves in the situation. And that's what this is really about, is each day for us to be able to gather, learn a little bit together as a community, and strengthen each other, strengthen our faith and our emunah. That will surely help. So any other thoughts or wishes while we're all together?
Did you tape this?
Yes, I did record it, I believe.
You did? Okay, good.
I'll have Rabbi Newman figure out what to do with it from there.
Okay, it was really good. Thank you. Really, really
Thank
good.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
So once again, so I am going to continue. I'm going to continue with the Parsha on Wednesday. Tomorrow and Thursday, Rabbi Newman is going to begin the study of Mesilat Yesharim, which is a wonderful text to be studying at this time.
Yeah.
Good to see you all.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So good to see everyone.
Lindsay, are you using your camera?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
All right, well, gee.
It's
you're
been,
missing everybody jumping
we're
in.
still using the cameras.
That's good.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Jay,
Hi.
how you doing?
A
lot
long
of people
ago
don't
was that. Yeah. That was a long time ago.
How's everybody doing?
We're doing
Good,
good.
good.
Sorry I
Okay.
missed you on Friday.
Where are you,
We'll catch up.
Rabbi, right now? At home?
I can-
Very good, very good.
All right,
Everyone
you
stay
guys.
safe. Stay
Everyone
safe.
stay safe.
You,
Amen
Thank
to
you.
that.
You as well.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Good to see
See,
you.
Rabbi,
Bye.
if they allowed a minion like this, it'd be great.
Yeah, I know.
Done.
I know. Well, we haven't.
If you could have a minion, to get a Zoom minion, wow.
Well, we get together every day. You know that.
We have,
Yeah,
we
I-
have a pseudo minion every
But
morning
if you
and
have
night. We just
minions where
can't
you
say
give them
hi.
Leah's, that'd be great.
But Ivan Gilbert used to talk about that we'd use the technology for getting together like this.
Yeah,
If,
that's
if
true.
we could have the classes that you have at night, if we could eventually do that, even if you don't react to the people that are watching, that would be wonderful.
But we're working on it. We're getting back to regular schedule now that Pesach's over. So we're working on that.
And being able to have it on even after all of this is over, do you think you could do Zoom?
Well, possibly, yes. Even
That
from
would
the
be wonderful.
classrooms at the shul, we can do that.
That's
That would
good.
be
All
wonderful.
right, guys, take care. Good to see
Bye-bye.
everybody.
All right,
Thank you all for
Rabbi.
having
Bye-bye.
fun.
Take care.
Bye and bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye everyone. Good luck with your patio.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
That was nice.